Hello, this is Western Jeff. Thanks for watching. Let's talk about Draenor Hunter issues and also maybe my setup, my personal setup. I do want to preference here, since I got about a minute to speak before we actually start with the video. There are two different categories for PvP with the Hunter. It's RBGs or arenas. And you're going to choose your buttons, your spec, how you play will be different based on whether you're doing an RBG or an arena. And that's because hunters have different responsibilities. In RBGs, you're responsible for node protection, defense, stealth capping, damage output, crowd control, whereas in arenas, you're more responsible for crowd control and damage output. So your specs, your buttons, your gear will actually physically change based on what you're doing. Let's jump right into it. Let's go to the talents. My philosophy is that hunters have a huge amount of talents in which to choose from, and we want to reduce button bloat. And that's a primary concern. And the way that I reduce button bloat is I want to keep only the really useful talents that I need, and then try to put everything else on a passive if possible. And my purpose when I choose my talents is to improve my survivability and perform my duties better, such as node protection, damage output, crowd control, and stealth capping. So I went here for Crouching Tiger. That's the first one. This has a dual benefit for the deterrence reduction and the disengage. That's massive. For two of my major defensive cooldowns to get that reduction, it really outdoes the other two. The second is Wolverine Sting. I chose Wolverine because it is an absolutely awesome CC spell. It's tremendously underutilized within the Hunter community. The CC is not like a trap. It's automatic. It's like 8 seconds, totally unbuffed. It's absolutely beautiful. It's one of the greatest CCs I think hunters have, more so than even concussive shot, and it really ranks up there where scatter shot used to be. It's that good. The other buttons, binding and intimidation, I didn't like them. That's just button bloat. It doesn't really improve much, in my opinion. This next set here, I chose Iron Hawk, and the reason is it's button bloat again, and out of those three, the greatest benefit to be able to reduce in PvP by hull damage by 10%. I can't pass that up almost for nothing. Thrill the Hunt. This is another one. This is focused more on resource management. This tier is definitely a resource management tier. Out of the three, the Thrill the Hunt seems to be the best. You can go either way. That steady focus, you know, if you really wanted to. If you could make a case and show on a spreadsheet that works, you can do that. But going back there, that Iron Hawk is such a great thing compared to the other ones. Murder of Crows. This is really I've used Blink before, but Murder of Crows is really great because it helps deter stealth classes from re-stealthing. It stops them from doing that. That's a great thing. I don't like the Stampede, and I don't like it because it's a cooldown that's easy to see and easy to deflect. Additionally, it has its damage reduced by 25%. It used to be 100% for every pet that used to be out there. Now it's 25%. I mean, you're only getting like, what, 125% of a pet's damage? That's nothing. That's ridiculous. Murder of Crows is definitely a big winner. And it's a winner because it's a great tool when you're node defending or putting damage on an enemy to prevent them from re-stealthing. Power Shot is the next one I want to talk about. Power Shot is the biggest spell that I use. It's my opener for many encounters. It has a nice damage to it, but its real benefit is its knockback. It knocks not only the enemy you're targeting, but everybody else within the line of sight of it, between you and your target. It's so great. That glaive and the barrage I don't use glaives nearly as much, and the barrage has a really massive spell effect. You can see other players using it. It's easily dodgeable, easy to silence, whereas power shot, it doesn't. You have to be focused on the enemy in order to actually see him actually cast that spell, whereas the barrage and the glaive toss are different. This next tier is the 100 tier. I chose the ammunitions, and I'll get to that in a minute. I can't read necessarily what's in the video here, but that lone wolf is specifically geared for marksmen, but I don't use it. And the reason why is that my pet will put out so much damage that I don't need to. Lone wolf, to me, is a spell that's really good for raiding, not for PvPing, especially when you have multiple enemies such as ads that you're dealing with. When it came to the exact ammunitions, there was one winner only. That is the Frozen, and that's because it has the CC control of reducing the enemy's movement by 50% on an auto shot. That is great. And, you know, having damage is just a bonus. The other two, the Incendiary and the Poison, I mean, that's just a damage output. Increases your damage output, nothing more. And this and it's not necessarily passive like it says, it's an actual button, but it's a buffable button, meaning it's something you click every 60 minutes. And to my knowledge, it's not dispellable. Let's go to my glyphs here. Let's talk about the minor glyphs. Most of the minor glyphs, in my opinion, are useless. The only glyph that I would recommend is getting the glyph of revival to reduce the pushback. It's the reduction is by 100%. That's really important, especially in arena groups, or if you're in a long battle and your pet dies and then you want to recast him, especially if he's putting up 30% or more of your damage. It's really important to get that pet back into the action. The other three I use are RBG glyphs. I use camo. I'm always camoed unless I'm actually fighting somebody. If I'm defending or something like that, I'll always be camoed. Without the camouflage glyph, using camo in battlegrounds is pointless. It's not something I would ever recommend. Glyph of Liberation. This is a big bonus to to be able to have survival, to be able to have self-heals. Healers are in RBG groups, hunters are very low priority. In fact, you're probably the last priority, and you won't have any healers around. So that Liberation. The other one is the Chimera Shot. That's the 2%. Every time you shoot, that's another 2% of total health regained. That's a great thing. That's in my standard rotation. The Chimera Shot's the signature shot for marksmen. It used to be better. It used to have an increase in damage. It used to be 4%, but they really nerfed that, but it's still great. Now, if you were a survival hunter, of course, those glyphs would change, and you would probably use the traps glyphs more. Let's go to my pets. You know, I use Ferocity for the damage, and the reason being is that it has the least amount of buttons associated with it. It's easy, you just set it and go, whereas the Cunning, you have more buttons to deal with, and controlling your pet, you have a greater use of the pet. It has a little bit better utility, but I don't use my pet for utility purposes. I use my pet for damage and annoyance, not for crowd control or buffs or anything of that nature. And that's going to differ on your opinion and your play style. If you use your pet as a buffable or as an intricate component of how you engage the hordes or whoever you're fighting against, you're gonna change that, of course. Let's talk about the specs real quick. I always use Marksman. Marksman is a great PvP because you get to plan out your attack. You plan out your offensive cooldowns. BM and Survival, you don't. In Survival, you are reacting. Your cooldowns are reacting. You don't get to choose when to start the encounter in Survival. And to me, that's such a tremendous disadvantage that I can't choose when to start the encounter, when to pop my cooldowns, that I have to wait for an RNG to come up. I mean, that's a big difference between people loving me in an RBG and people hating me. In BM, the focus on the pet is so great, and my focus when I play is not to use the pet as much. In BM, you have a huge amount of buttons, and the reliance on that pet is so great. I don't like it. I personally, that's something that I have shied away from. For marksman, the big offensive cooldown again is that rapid fire. That's a big cooldown. It's like a personal hero. It's like getting heroicism for just being you. And I bind that, of course, to all my other buttons, my offensive cooldowns, to give me a massive stacking bonus when I use my signature shots. Again, in my rotation, what I use is the Chimera, aim shot, steady shot, kill shot. And what I do is as I'm a button pusher, I'm no longer a clicker, and so I use that right on my index finger from index to pinky. I do that. Let's talk briefly about, I have character stats. As a marksman here, most people in marksman in this before the 6.1 patch here, they're using crit. I am not using crit. I am instead trying to stack versatility. Versatility used to be the PvP. If you remember back, it used to be the PvP power and the resilience. That's your PvP stat, and it's not as great as it used to be. In previous expansions, you would get a lot more percentage out than what you get now. But I'm still using versatility. Again, I want to read. I'm not going to rely on being able to crit hit somebody. I'd prefer to have that spell to be passive, the bonus to be passive, and that allows me to focus on my signature moves and signature shots. It reduces the button bloat. It reduces the complexity of playing a hunter. And it's a 2-for-1. The damage output is twice that of resilience for each point put in. Trinkets. I use a trinket that increases the versatility. In the previous expansions, it used to be agility, and I bind that to my other offensive cooldowns. And the reason is how I play. It works with how I plan my cooldowns and my play style. When I choose the encounter for a defense of a node, popping that is much greater. I don't do the removal of crowd control or the increase of health because to me, even though it may increase my survival for the health, it's minimum. For the CC, because I plan out the encounter, I can choose when to pop deterrence, when to do the disengage, when to do the feign death, and I'm a night elf. I can do the shadow meld and the camo. To me, that's more than enough cooldowns to fight off most players and multiple players at once. Let's talk about the pet. My pet is a pet that's no longer available. I use just a cat that used to be in Stranglethorn Vale. It is actually what most people would think is an exotic pet because it has 2 bonus abilities. I just got lucky with that. The real bonus is that it acts like a druid. So what I've renamed it as Druid Heals, and that's just to convince PvP players who are not savvy at all to think that might be an actual real player. And because he has the same script when it comes to how does he walk, how does he engage his enemies from behind, it may actually convince several people for a few seconds that might actually be a real player. And to me, for them to anybody to ever focus on my pet is a big bonus. It puts pressure off of me and my teammates, and it's big. Before I hit, we've had problems with Recount. Our signature shots put on stings, and even though if we're not activating it, those stings, it's still clicking off damage. So we're showing sometimes hunters will have lower, DPS on recounts. That's an issue. And also, how about your pet damage? If you have your pet and you're not using blink or rapid or rush or dash or something of that nature to get to the enemy first, your damage might be lower. Those are some of the issues, and also the specs and what I use for PvP. This is Western Jeff. Thanks for watching.